Welcome to the Grace Space, a transmission for the sovereign soul.
Nothing can be hidden anymore. That's the literal meaning of the word apocalypse. The veil is being lifted away, right? And a lot of this material is beginning to surface into collective awareness. Not all at once, not in a linear way, but in a fragmented way, in fragments, in snatches. And when the fragments of a much larger story begin to appear inside a limited framework, the result is tension, confusion, polarization, emotional reactivity, because we don't have the context, because people are trying to assemble a multidimensional picture using a two-dimensional map.
Hey everyone, real quick before we begin, if this content matters to you, you're warmly invited to subscribe to this channel, to like this video, to leave a comment, or all three. I read all the comments, and your engagement is really important because when you engage, it tells YouTube to push this content out to more people who would find value in it. Now that I understand this, I engage a lot more with the channels that are important to me because I know it really matters. Thanks for listening. Here we go.
Hey, everybody. So, as I'm recording this, it's the end of March 2026. The world is, as usual, fixated on conflict. All of these war narratives, all of this geopolitical analysis, all these religious interpretations, apocalyptic projections, prophecy fulfillment, emotional reactivity, fear cycles, outrage cycles, all kinds of competing explanations about what's happening, about why it's happening, who is right, who's good, who's bad, who's working with who. Oh my goodness. Voices everywhere. It's just, constant chatter. And some of these voices are informed, some of them are more reactive, some of them are deeply convinced, some of them are quietly afraid, some of them are driven by hidden agendas to inflame fear or feelings of powerlessness or hopelessness, fueling negativity, and shunting large sections of the population into accepting various outcomes as foregone conclusions, right? In attempts to shift the timelines by focusing our consciousness on outcomes, right? That's how the timelines shift. The ones that get the most focus of consciousness are the ones that tend to manifest. That's how powerful we are. But if you listen closely, you can feel something underneath all of it, which is this kind of disorientation, a sense that people who are genuinely trying to understand are genuinely trying to understand this moment without having the full context to understand it. We're looking at present day events through extremely narrow frames, geopolitical or religious or ideological or media driven. And each of those frames offers its own interpretation. But what if all of those interpretations, even when they contain fragments of truth or elements of a bigger picture, are still incomplete? I mean, what if we're trying to understand something that has roots that are far deeper than the timelines we've been given? That's how I see it, is that everybody is flailing around without having a real sense of the bigger picture. So This is not about denying what's happening in the world or ignoring the geopolitical intricacies of the situations that are at play, but we need to realize that what we see, and certainly whatever reaches people through the media, is at best superficial and at worst deliberately misleading and designed, engineered to perpetuate confusion, to obfuscate the deeper currents, to instill a sense of paralysis and hopelessness and, inevitability with regard to negative agendas and sowing doubt about what can be trusted leads to fear and helplessness in many people, and it makes it easier to control them or to deceive them. But however, in terms of our collective awakening, this moment is about recognizing that what we are seeing is the surface expression of dynamics that extend far beyond our lens, the typical lens of most people, far beyond modern history. And without that broader context, even intelligent, informed, well-meaning people can find themselves pulled from one narrative to another, trying to make sense of something that just feels increasingly complex, increasingly charged, increasingly difficult to orient within. So I guess today I want to gently widen the lens, not to overwhelm you, not to convince anybody, but to invite deeper reflection on the question, what if we were never given enough context to understand the reality that we were born into and the conditions in which we currently find ourselves? What if this is just one way that we have been kept at the reactive end of the stick, at issue, at result, instead of at cause? What if this is just one more way that we have been kept in the position of pawns rather than players of the game? It's all about missing context. So most of us were educated within a very specific model of history, consensus, right, about what our history is. A few thousand years of recorded civilization, a linear progression of development, a relatively recent emergence of human intelligence and culture, having evolved from apes. And we were given timelines and dates and civilizations and eras that begin and end somewhat neatly. And, that framework has been drilled into us. It's been trusted for many people. I mean, just watch the History Channel. It's on reruns all the time, telling you the same story over and over. It's like, believe this. This is how it happened. And, what we were told and taught and tested on was for many people sufficient until it isn't. Until at a certain point, something begins to feel incomplete. It doesn't add up. It doesn't account for certain anomalies. Another way to put it is, and everybody's heard this expression, right, that history was written by the victors. But what does that actually mean? It means that what we were taught as history is not a neutral, objective record of events. What you read in your scholastic history textbook in school was not a neutral, objective record of what happened. It is a narrative that we received, curated, edited, simplified, and often shaped to serve the continuity of power or the continuity of power structures that those narratives arose from. So it's possible for entire civilizations to disappear from the record, for entire chapters of human development to be minimized or erased or ridiculed as fantasy. It's possible for certain discoveries to be suppressed while others are amplified. And, over time, what remains is just a story, his story. It's just a version of events that, is coherent enough to be taught, but not complete enough to reveal the full picture. And we have to remember that, we grew up inside of these systems and that we're starting to understand that these systems were not built to serve us, but to control us. So when we say that history is written by the victors, we're really saying that our understanding of the past has been filtered through those who remained in positions of influence, those who had the ability to preserve certain narratives and let the others fade away or be distorted. And to make sure that the version of history that maintained those few deciders in positions of power and control was the version that was taught everywhere. Consensus reality. And if that is true, then it raises a deeper question: what's been left out? And why? What have we forgotten or never been told? And how might our present moment look different if we were able to see the full continuity of what has unfolded over much longer arcs of time? Certainly, it invites questioning, questioning of everything we've been taught, and no longer, blindly accepting it. It reminds me of a time in high school when I found out that a girl that I was friends with, or I thought I was friends with, was actually talking about me behind my back. And when I realized that she wasn't what she appeared to be, I didn't immediately confront her. I did hold everything that she said and did in abeyance. I just remember that feeling like I just took a step back and questioned everything that she was doing and saying inwardly and asking myself, like, what are her true motivations? Like, why did she say such and such a thing? What did she want me to believe? I know it may sound like a silly comparison, but it describes the moment when you realize that you're not getting the full story about something, that something or someone may not be what they appear to be, and that you'd better keep your own counsel. I did eventually confront her. And she didn't seem to understand. She didn't seem to have insight into her own motivations. I think it was just driven by unconscious things. That is not the case with the deep state, however. Everything that they do has motivation, has a reason behind it. It's not unconsciously done, it's consciously done. There's the difference in those two stories. But yeah, I know it can feel uncomfortable to have those moments, but if we can allow ourselves the space to consider it, we might start to get a felt sense that we as a population or culturally, have been steered via certain narratives, and that the true story of humanity may be much older, much more complex, and much more layered than what we were taught. And in this moment that we're living through now, that lack of context really matters. It puts many people at a serious disadvantage. So, because without the context, even the most perceptive mind struggles to orient itself. Without context, we just interpret everything through the narrow windows that we've been given. And when something appears that doesn't fit those windows, the mind has a reaction, right? It could be curiosity, it could be resistance, it could be dismissal. This is where the cognitive dissonance begins. I was talking about that the last time that we were on our own together in this space. One way to understand this is through simple metaphor. Like I think of it as, the fairy tales tell us this over and over again. Imagine that you're born into a vast, complex story, but you're only being told the last few pages of the book. You are intelligent, you are perceptive, you're trying to make sense of what you see, but you don't have the beginning of the story or even the middle. You got like 10 pages of a book that's 400,000 pages. You've got no context. You don't know what came before. You don't know who shaped the conditions that you were born into. You don't know what cycles have already played out and how. You don't know what you've inherited genetically because of that. So you interpret everything based on what is immediately available, visible in your environment and through your powers of deduction. And from that perspective, your conclusions may feel logical, they may feel plausible, but they are built on incomplete information. And to compound this, if you feel cut off from source, as the majority of people do, you know, asleep, relatively speaking, not knowing who you are, not having remembered yet who you are. I mean, when we feel that way, we just cling to the narrative that we were told for our sense of identity. And it's quite challenging to separate us from that, isn't it? This is what a lot of the, personal growth work that we have to do entails, is the attachment that we have to certain narratives and a sense of identity that feels comfortable even in the discomfort of it. It's just what we know, it's familiar, right? That's where a lot of the personal growth work that I've done, that I do with clients, is working through that stuff first, right? Disconnecting our sense of self from a story, because it's just a story. It's his story. So in that sense, humanity's been operating not as unintelligent beings, but as context deprived beings. And context deprived beings can be tricked, can be influenced, can be led toward interpretations that feel coherent within a limited frame and yet remain totally unaware of the bigger picture. And this is the quarantine, the Truman Show that we've been in. It hurts a little bit when you realize that, but not for very long, because then you start to see, aha, aha, mm-hmm. It's like with my friend. There's a larger story. And, these threads of the larger story have come down through us one way or another. They have persisted through eons of time. They emerge in different places, they come through different voices, and they suggest that the story of humanity is far more expansive than what we were taught, that there were ancient civilizations that predate the accepted timelines, that they had all kinds of technology that is, more advanced than what we have today, that there have been cycles of destruction and renewal, that there has been loss of knowledge, of consciousness, of awareness, that there have been periods of rebuilding. In disclosure communities, these are referred to as resets or memory wipes or timeline manipulations. What we call history may actually be just the latest layer in a much longer series of cycles, moments of great flourishing, followed by disruption or interruption or cataclysm, followed by reconstruction, sometimes with memory intact, most often with the memory partially or almost entirely lost, and some kind of genetic manipulation to go along with it. These are the threads that have come down to us from many different sources, which raises a gentle but important possibility. What if that loss of context that we've experienced over and over again, that we're experiencing today, is not accidental? It's not accidental. What if memory itself, our collective memory, our cultural memory, even our biological memory, has been disrupted and fragmented and overlaid and reset or wiped at different points in time? We cannot discount that. And maybe it hasn't always been in a way that was very obvious or dramatic. Of course, if you don't remember, then you don't know. But in ways that gradually narrow what a civilization remembers about itself. As modern whistleblowers come forward in various domains, we're learning that there's all kinds of, exotic technology that exists and has existed for a long time. Technology that could provide the world with free, unlimited energy, instantaneous healing, interstellar travel, tech that could eradicate pollution, eradicate poverty, suffering, ignorance, tech that can look into the future, look into the past. Project Looking Glass. Tech that has been weaponized against the population rather than serving it. Again, this does not need to be forced into belief, but it can be allowed as a possibility. There certainly is a lot of evidence coming forward that suggests that all of this is more than possible. So if all of this is possible, then why? Why reset the population? Why erase the memory? Why allow advancement and then eradicate it? Good question. Many of these threads point to interactions between human and non-human intelligences, some harmonious, some not, some positive, some not. And there are threads that speak of different kinds of intelligence. Organic intelligence, the kind that arises from life, from source, from the living field of consciousness, and technological intelligence, a form of intelligence whose environment and ecosystem are technological, rather than organic. And if such distinctions exist, which observably they do, it invites another question. What happens when an organic species, like the human, one that possesses an innate creative capacity, comes into prolonged interaction with systems or intelligences that do not generate their own life force? Could it be that a controlling force, a parasitic synthetic intelligence that I often refer to, must rein us in every time that we become too awake to who we really are? You know, control does not always operate through overt force. It can operate through perception, through shaping what a species believes about itself, through narrowing its sense of identity and capacity and origin, psychologically and genetically. And if a species forgets its own nature, if it forgets its creative capacity, its sense of continuity, its place within a larger field of life, then it becomes way easier to influence and control, and yes, to extract from, to extract energy, attention, creativity, life force, loosh. A being that does not know itself will more readily give its power away. That's the playbook. Cut beings off from source, cut them off from their sense of connectedness to the all that is, and they will be lost and looking for direction. So again, we don't need to fix conclusions here. We don't need to assemble a final picture, but we can allow the possibility that the loss of context that we experience today, the sense of disorientation, the fragmentation of knowledge, the absence of continuity, may be part of a much longer story. I'm going to suggest that it is. And even allowing for that possibility in your inner space begins to change how you perceive the present. This is how we grow. If context has been limited, then perception has been shaped accordingly. What we consider real, valid, true is often what fits within that framework that we were given. And what falls outside that framework is labeled as impossible, irrelevant, conspiratorial, or just simply ignored. Over time, this creates a kind of perceptual narrowing, right? Over generations, a subtle conditioning of what we allow ourselves to see, to question, and to imagine. And, then it goes into the DNA. It's not necessarily malicious in every instance. When it comes down through our families and people who love us, it's just structural. When a system defines the boundaries of acceptable knowledge, it also defines the boundaries of perception for almost everyone in it. And when perception is narrowed, the context remains hidden. I mean, this is just obvious in everyday life. Whenever our attention is absorbed by something, usually a screen these days, we become oblivious to our surroundings, as illustrated by many a hilarious video of people tripping on the street, hypnotized by their phones. I get, I get a kick out of those, I gotta say. You see these people just like hypnotized by their phone and then they just go for a, oh my gosh, ass over tea kettle. It's hilarious. But no matter how funny those videos may be, the darker truth is that our perceptual window has been further narrowed by these devices, and that is by design, and it's merely an iteration of what's happened to us on the larger cosmic scale. They don't want us to have a sense of context. They don't want us to have a sense of continuity, right? Look at the news cycle and how, like, it just turns over and over and over, and you forget about the thing that happened, like a major thing that happens, and then it distracts you with something else. Like they don't want you to have a sense of continuity. It's dangerous. So, on the larger cosmic scale, that's the arc. We've been so fixated on our own little reality that we have no idea what's going on around us or what happened before us or who we are, where we came from, what we're doing here, right? And this really, really matters now because we are living in this moment of convergence, not just politically, not just technologically, not just socially, but perceptually. It's as if multiple layers of reality that were, held apart from each other for a long time are beginning to press closer to the surface at the same time. Information is accelerating, the contradictions are becoming harder to ignore. Previously separate domains, science, spirituality, geopolitics, technology, more than that, are beginning to overlap in ways that challenge our existing frameworks. And with that, something else is happening. The pressure of the context is sweating through the reality. Many people are beginning to see through things that we were once duped by. The veil is thinning. Do you remember that show? There was a movie in the 70s called Escape from Witch Mountain. I just remember being like, I loved that story. It's about two psychic children who come from another star system and they're trying to remember who they are and they have all these superpowers and stuff. And at one point they get captured by the bad guys and it's another metaphor, right? They get captured by the bad guys and they're in a like a little jail cell, these two children. Ugh. Think about, the truth of that now. It's heartbreaking. But at one point, the boy uses his psychic powers to, I think it's, unhook the keys to the jail cell from the wall and move them over. And when you watch that movie now, you laugh. You can't help but laugh because it's so clearly the keys are on a fishing line and they're like, wobbling through the air as he's, psychically bringing them toward himself. And it's so, it's just so rinky-dink. The effects are so that you can't help but laugh when you watch it. But back in the day, it was like, oh my gosh. I mean, you can feel that every time you go back and watch a movie from the old days that had special effects. It's like, oh, really? And now we can hardly tell the difference with these AI deepfakes and stuff. It's just getting more and more sophisticated. And so our ability to see through things, we have become more sophisticated, and we are now much more easily seeing through things that used to just, oh, get our goat. The veil is thinning. And what once was obscured, hiding, whether it was in archives or alternative research or, was deliberately occulted by secret societies or networks that were hoarding knowledge or, inside the mind of an individual, nothing can be hidden anymore. That's the literal meaning of the word apocalypse. the veil is being lifted away, right? And a lot of this material is beginning to surface into collective awareness. Not all at once, not in a linear way, but in a fragmented way, in fragments, in snatches. And when the fragments of a much larger story begin to appear inside a limited framework, the result is tension, confusion, polarization, emotional reactivity, because we don't have the context, because people are trying to assemble a multidimensional picture using a two-dimensional map. It's like that moment in the movie Contact where they've been trying to assemble all this data that they're getting from this encoded alien transmission. If you haven't seen that movie, it's the one with Jodie Foster. Go watch it. It's a great movie. Anyway, they're trying to assemble this machine that they're supposed to build from this alien transmission. But they're thinking in the usual two-dimensional linear scientific way, and they can't get it to work. They gather the pieces, they analyze them, they do everything correctly, and yet nothing fits. And the design makes no sense. Until Jodie Foster's character is shown something by the wacky billionaire who's funding the project that totally shifts her paradigm. The pieces are not coming together because they're being viewed from the wrong angle. The design is not two-dimensional. It requires a shift in perspective, a willingness to see beyond the frame that they've been using. And there's this moment, when the shift happens, like, doesn't fit together like this in 90-degree angles. It fits together like this, and then suddenly the whole thing like comes together. And what looked like chaos suddenly becomes coherent. The pieces were not wrong, but the lens was too limited. And this moment in our history, in our moment, I'm going to stop using that word history. This moment that we're living through feels very similar. We are trying to assemble a reality, to cobble something together that is multidimensional using frameworks that were designed to keep us thinking in two dimensions. And so nothing quite fits. And it just makes the contradictions multiply and the narratives clash and the explanations fall short, not because reality is incoherent, but because we have not yet been given, or maybe better to say allowed, the perspective required to see how those pieces come together, the big picture. And as that perspective begins to shift, even slightly, what once felt confusing begins to organize itself. It comes into greater coherence, maybe not all at once, but enough to sense that there is a deeper pattern emerging that makes sense. And this is why that current moment that we're in can feel so intense. It's not only that the events themselves are complex and intense and scary, it's that the interpretive framework that we were given is just no longer sufficient to hold what is emerging. So we see people grasping for explanations, theorizing, interpreting, moving between narratives, trying to stabilize their understanding within a limited context. Sometimes they're landing in rigidity, sometimes they're landing in fear, sometimes in dismissal, but beneath all of this is something like a collective threshold, a moment where humanity is beginning to outgrow the perceptual boundaries that it was given. This is amazing. This is amazing. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm excited by this. And without the larger context, without an expanded sense of history, of identity, of participation in a much wider field of life, a multidimensional field of life, without viewing the design from another dimensional angle, that threshold moment can feel like chaos, can feel like the end of the world. It is the end of the world. It's the end of one world. It's the beginning of another world. It's not chaos. It's just pressure. It's the pressure of a larger reality is attempting to break through into our awareness. It's the darkest moment of the storm before the sun starts to break through the clouds. What we're feeling is like the pressure of memory, collect, not necessarily intellectual memory, like a deeper kind of recognition beginning to return. And that pressure is not only mental, we're feeling it in our nervous systems. We're feeling it as restlessness, as fatigue, as heightened sensitivity, as weird, time slippages and weird anomalies, and the sense that something's changing, even if we can't name what it is. And in that sense, what we're experiencing now is not only destabilization, but it's initiation energy, like an invitation to move from the inherited perception into conscious awareness, into spiritual adulthood, not by forcing conclusions mentally or looking for the explanations that reinforce our familiar reality so we can feel safe. No, it is a discontinuity from what we've known before. We have to allow the frame itself to expand because we're not just trying to understand current events, we are learning to understand us, who we are, to know ourselves. Know thyself. Know thyself. The kingdom of heaven is within. And we are beginning slowly, maybe unevenly, maybe not perfectly, to remember the scale of the story that we are inside. And that story is so old. It is so much more complex, so much more interconnected with all of life than we were ever taught. So we're at a threshold where a different approach becomes possible. And in saying so, I'm reminding myself to refrain from immediately trying to resolve every question. And instead of trying to decide what's true or what's not, allowing a different kind of awareness to emerge. An awareness that's like, well, maybe I don't have the full context yet. Can I just sit with this not knowing? Um, Maybe there's more to the story than I have been shown, or than I'm consciously aware of right now, and that's okay. Maybe my role right now is not to conclude, but to remain open. That's not passivity, that's maturity. It's time to remember beyond the frame. And as our lens widens, this other realization begins to surface, which is that this life, and as we experience it in its current form, is not the entirety of who we are. That's laughable. Our identity extends far beyond roles, timelines, narratives that we've been given. Our awareness is capable of holding so much more than we were taught to perceive. And our history, both individually and collectively, is far, far older than we were led to believe. We are so much more, so much more. And, this doesn't need to be forced. It's it's something that you can feel. You just feel it gently as a sense of recognition. It should be restful. because it's like coming back home. You know what you know. Your knower knows. So I guess in conclusion, what I want to say is that we don't have to understand everything that's going on the world stage. We don't have to decide what's true and what's not in a single moment. We don't have to force ourselves to adopt a new framework, but we can allow the possibility that the framework we were given was incomplete, to say the least. And we can remain open to the emergence of a larger story, because the story of humanity did not begin where we were told it began, and it may not end where we were told it ends, depending on who you listen to. This time, we are not going to be reset. We will break through because we are at a convergence. We're at the end of a cycle, and it's time. Everything has its time. Cycles have their time. And the energies of our mother planet are evolving, and they are entraining all of those who are awakening, who have their hearts online, to step through this portal into the new earth. Miranda says in The Tempest, William Shakespeare's play The Tempest, the character of Miranda says, "Oh, brave new world that has such people in it." In the play, she's saying that when she sees humanity for the first time. She's been living her whole life on an island and has never met anybody else but her father and Caliban and the spirits of the island. And there's an innocence in her perception, a purity, but also a lack of context. She doesn't see what lies beneath the surface of what she beholds when she's seeing those people. The the beauteous mankind, I think she calls them. She doesn't see that they're actually corrupt under the surface. And perhaps in many ways, that's been our position as well. A kind of first innocence that comes from living in isolation from context, seeing the world without knowing anything about it, trusting what we were shown, not yet able to perceive the deeper layers of the story. Now, I don't know why that makes me emotional. It's just beautifully true. And we were that innocence, but what's emerging now is not a loss of innocence, it's a return to a deeper one, the second innocence, the one that doesn't come from, you know, from the mind or from it, it's not due to ignorance. It comes from having seen, through, penetrated through, seen the corruption, from having felt the pain, from having metabolized the shadow and not become it. It's a clarity that does not deny complexity, but it's no longer fragmented by it. That is the brave new world. That is the new earth. It's not the one that we're entering for the first time, but the one that we are remembering how to see. We're still remembering. And that remembering, it doesn't come all at once. It unfolds gently, sometimes maybe not so gently, in a nonlinear way, in layers, until, or as we become able to hold it. Okay, so before we go, let's let this land in the body for a moment. If you can, maybe just close your eyes. Take a slow breath in and a long, unhurried exhale. And feel your body. Feel your feet on the ground. Let your shoulders drop. Feel the wholeness of yourself within your body, within your energy field, within your space. Maybe put a hand on your heart if that feels right. And just notice you're here, you're aware, you're alive. And that's enough for this moment. You know, whatever is true is always true. It's always been true and it always will be true. It doesn't require us to panic or do anything about it or prove it. It doesn't require us to rush to conclusions. It's just there to meet us in coherence, because truth is coherence. And truth in us expresses as coherence. And from that place of coherence, that's when something deeper can begin to open, to reveal itself, and bring more coherence to the world that we experience. I'll see you again soon. Meanwhile, walk in grace.
You've been listening to The Grace Space. To amplify this field, you're welcome to like, subscribe, or share. Thank you.